podcast. This is a big one, mainly because it's the most prep I've done for any of them, because picking this was actually tricky. I'm joined once again with Michael Wyllie. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing okay. It was a long walk.
Long walk. Yes. Also, we have an off-mic Harrison King. Say hello, Harrison.
Hello.
There we go. I've titled this a Fringe special because we're in Edinburgh and it's the Fringe.
That's as far as it goes.
There's not really anything Fringe related.
There's nothing Fringe related at all to it, apart from the fact that it's here and it's this time of year. So, the main reason prepping for this took a while was because I haven't mentioned what we're doing. We're doing the best Denis Villeneuve films. Villeneuve. Best Denis films.
I spoke to my mum about this, and she thought he was some indie off the grid director. And I asked him, is it just because he has a French name? Because he has done several $100 million films. He's very much mainstream.
Yeah, he is.
And nobody seems to know who he is.
That's the thing. You mention his name and people are like, who? And then you mention the film and they go, oh, right, that guy. But the main reason it took such a long time is because I hadn't seen a couple of the films, but I also wanted to rewatch some of them. And they're long.
Yeah.
They take a while.
Intense movies. I will say there's two that I've not seen. I've not seen Incendie, and I've not seen Polytechnique.
Okay. I haven't seen Polytechnique either, and I have seen Incendies, but there was another one that I haven't seen.
Enemy?
But it might be Enemy. Yes, it's Enemy. But I'm reliably informed that it wouldn't be any good.
Well, Enemy's not on my list, so we're fine.
Okay, sweet, we're good. Rewatching all these was a bit of a pain in the arse. However, rewatch them I have, and I know how much you particularly love his films.
I'm torn between him and the last director we did, Nolan, for my favourite director, because what I like so much about Denis Villeneuve is he's consistent, and not only is he consistent in the quality, he's consistent in style.
Style, yeah.
When I watch a Denis Villeneuve film, I know what sort of film I'm getting into,
Definitely.
and I know it's going to be high quality.
Mm-hmm. No, he's very, very sort of continuous in his techniques and that kind of stuff, which I really appreciate. Mm-hmm. But you love his films to the point where I had to do I had to really make sure my arguments do justice. Otherwise, I'm going to be torn a new one.
But you're going to hate this because I'm going to be talking non-stop. But I told you this before, that I've just done my list based off the films of his that I like.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's the point.
I struggled pretty hard to rank them objectively.
Well, the main thing that came out of our last episode was that people said I was more cinematic in terms of analysis and you were more thematic. In terms of you liked the messages that they carried sometimes more than the filmmaking elements of them.
I think I know that. I think I do that consciously now.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's definitely what I prefer about good movies.
Because that's the thing is, I'm mainly coming at this from a more sort of objective perspective. Mm-hmm. I like his films a lot. I think he's creative. I think he's astute. But I think he's brave as well because he understands the value of patience. This is a thing across all
I
of the
wanted
films.
to touch on this.
Yeah.
I think Denis Villeneuve stands apart from any other director, and you can track it by shot length and editing style.
Yeah.
Because he is one of the few big budget directors still working today who forces you to stay in the moment. Yeah. And I really like that about his films. Mm-hmm.
There's an exercise that film teachers will do with their students where they will ask them to click every time there's a cut, and with
you watch a Marvel film
exactly whereas this, and particularly this is one of the main reasons because he works with Roger Deakins a lot, who has a lot of
and on the films where Roger Deakins isn't directly involved, you can see where his techniques are still being applied.
Absolutely. Yeah. I respect how much control he has. I personally don't always think his holding of shots works in his favour, but I think there's a lot to like about it. Mm-hmm. I think we're about to disagree on our list. In fact, I know that we are.
Yeah.
But I did have a far greater battle with this.
Have you done 3 or 5?
I've done 3.
Okay. Well, I'll do 3 then.
Okay. Have you done 5?
I've done 5.
Right. Okay. Well, I think there's a high possibility that you won't need to do 5 because we will talk about a film that you want to, because it might be in mine.
I mean, I'll show you it now, because if we do 3, then I won't get a chance to
show me 4 and 5.
Arrival was 4, and Dune was 5.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, we will definitely cover one of those.
Right.
And I think it's the one you want to talk about more. I personally get on better with Nolan's style than Denis Villeneuve's, but there's no question as to how much merit there is in this stuff. And actually, I mentioned this to you a couple of days ago, but everyone loved our last chat. It's the most listened episode in the long history of this podcast.
Of the real life podcast.
Yes. I'm going to jump in with number 3 because I feel like we need to talk about it. My number 3 is Dune.
My number 3 is Prisoners. Let's go with Dune first.
Okay, alright. Well, okay, I'll go with Dune because for me, choosing what was third was really tough because there are a large number of similarities, I think, between Dune and Blade Runner and Arrival. I think.
And was it those two that didn't make the cut?
It was those two that didn't make the cut.
Okay,
and I wanted, in some way, to fit in one of the two of them, but I think
we'll get to.
I think we will get to it. I love the way it looked. I think I put it into the top 3 eventually because theoretically, I think its source material could make it completely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like, the whole film is like, gotta get that spice.
The space cocaine that makes the economy work.
Exactly, space cocaine, yeah. And the dude's name is Paul, and I just think it's funny. And but it lands absolutely perfectly. It doesn't feel like ridiculous.
I was really, as someone who has read the book and watched the David Lynch version, before this Dune movie even got announced, I was very apprehensive because before this film, there was a big perception around Frank Herbert's magnum opus that it was unadaptable. You couldn't put it to film without it seeming either ridiculous or like impenetrable. And simply the fact that Denis Villeneuve managed to make it sort of digestible for a mainstream audience, given how deep the text goes. I mean, there's a glossary of terms at the end of the book that you're meant to refer to as you go,
right? Because
he just refuses to explain anything to you. Dune, I'm glad we get a chance to talk about because I think it's a great way to talk about two things in film that are both becoming incredibly relevant today in terms of how we consume and analyze media. Right. And those two texts are Edward Said's Orientalism and Death of the Author. Okay. Particularly in how people approach Dune. So I've seen a lot of discourse online saying that it's just another white savior story. It's Hollywood presenting Lawrence of Arabia again. You know. They just, this white savior elite, they're literally feudal lords, come into this planet and the superstitious locals raise them up to godly status and, and the world is saved. So, like, there's two things to go off there. It's like, well, Frank Herbert didn't intend that. I mean, he intended the entire Dune series as a rebuke of messianic leaders. Right. In term, and he stretches that to include Stalin, but also JFK. He's quoted as saying JFK was the most dangerous president America ever had because he smiled and everyone smiled with him, but he's the one who got them into Vietnam in the first place. And he said that Richard Nixon was the most valuable president they ever had because he taught them the lesson by example, not to trust.
Fair enough.
But then you get into the whole thing of Death of the Author, which is that the things in a text speak more to what the text says than what the author says they do.
Okay.
So this whole thing of do you buy Death of the Author? Can you analyze a text outside of what the author says it's meant to do?
Sure. Okay. Right.
I would argue you definitely can.
Yeah.
So then, if you take Death of the Author as valid, you then need to analyze the other thing when it comes to Dune, which is do the things in this text sufficiently make it an anti-imperialist, anti-orientalist story? I would argue that they do. I would argue they definitely do. Because the entire point of this messianic journey that Paul Atreides undergoes is the fact that he's the worst thing that ever happens to these people.
Sure.
And that is stated in no uncertain terms in the book. And I hope it gets covered in part 2. But here's why Dune was number 5 on my list, is it's only half a story.
Yes, that's something I wanted to touch on because after the first one, I felt like we did kind of need 3 hours of please do this properly. And I think it nails the tone, the look. It's the film for me in which his angular interior design fits into the world better than any of the other ones. Yeah. There's a level of scale in his films, and I think that's his territory.
Denis Villeneuve does scale excellently. Exactly. Because you get this 2-minute montage of these giant warships leaving the oceans, and they dwarf the humans on the beaches. They dwarf Paul as he has his emotional walk into the sunset. Yeah. And then the music builds. We'll touch on Hans Zimmer's score in a second.
Sure.
But and then the next shot is them coming out of the Guild spaceship, and you can barely see them. And the planet bears down on it, and everything in that shot is just titanic in scale, and it's excellently done.
I think the reason that kind of scale works so well is because he's not only creating the big worlds, but he's asking the big questions every time. Like, he's covering the big topics. So every film carries weight, which makes them worth something in terms of the questions it's asking you. And I like that. I think this one, the theme of kind of succession and responsibility is sort of escalated to this massive scale
Yeah.
and puts it a level above most of the blockbusters I've seen. It's experiential. It's made to be seen in the cinema, like with Interstellar, that was created so that people could have an experience watching it
And could really feel themselves.
Yeah,
And feel the sound.
Absolutely.
Because
it needs Dolby.
mhm.
It really needs Dolby, this, because that added an extra layer to it that you wouldn't get if you just sat watching it at home.
Yeah.
Using that sense of grandeur to make these themes, it seemed more hard hitting for that, and I think it sets up a mood which then forces you to engage in feelings in a kind of existential way,
Mhm.
which is why I think Blade Runner works, because it's very good at lining up those themes, but also brilliant at putting you into the world, which is going to force you to feel how you're meant to in terms of what the film wants.
Mhm.
The 2-part thing is, I think, a plus point to it.
I'm very glad they did it that way.
Because I think if it doesn't do that, then
You end up with David Lynch.
you end up with David Lynch, and Denis Villeneuve has to abandon his pacing and his storytelling and crush in far too much of it at once. Because what's going to happen is, instead of if it was directed by J.J. Abrams or the Coen brothers, we might have still got 2 parts, but each one would have been 2 hours, and part 2 would have been the same. So essentially, we're getting a 3rd part from Denis Villeneuve, because he'll do 3 hours each way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, we're getting a 3rd part anyway.
is it going to be 3?
So we're getting the first Dune book, part 1 and 2,
Right.
and then we're getting the sequel as
okay.
one film, because
Okay.
the second book is far shorter.
Okay.
And that's going to be sort of, that is, I mean, in the Dune book series, that's kind of the Paul Atreides trilogy.
Okay, right.
Well, I mean, obviously there's only 2 books, but that's Paul Atreides' part of the Dune series.
That makes sense,
So we're going to
yeah.
get a full coverage of that.
Mhm.
And it's the rapid rise and then rapid fall of Paul Atreides as he becomes this messianic religious figure, emperor of the universe, which is a big promotion.
For the universe.
I'm not even kidding. And then his fall from that position.
Sure. I think I haven't put that much into, and shame on me for not knowing much about Dune as a series or going off the original. But I think it did need to be 2 parts, definitely.
Yeah, 100. I'm very glad it's going to be, because I mean, Denis Villeneuve is a childhood fan of the series. He said he read the first book when he was like 12 years old, and he was quoted in an interview saying that he's making this series from an audience of one, which is himself. Which is why I really trust him with this as a Dune fan. Anyway, Hans Zimmer abandoned working on Tenet so that he could make the score for Dune, because he too is a childhood fan of the Dune series.
Thank God he did, because Ludwig
because it's
Göransson
incredible.
was fit.
Ludwig Göransson's score for Tenet was grating and bleak, and I thought it was everything the film needed it to be.
Loved it.
And likewise for Hans Zimmer's scoring of Dune. I mean, they invented something like 23 instruments.
Oh wow!
So that they could get these sort of alien sounds. The only instruments they use that are used today are ones that are on sort of fringe cultures that have endured for thousands of years anyway. So that's the bagpipes and stuff. And then the only thing that they thought would remain constant over such a timescale is the human voice.
Right.
Which is why the human voice is used to such an extent in the Dune score.
That does get slightly grating.
Yeah, towards the end of the movie, I'm kind of done with it. And then they just sort of mash together a lot of human cultural musical traditions that already exist to try and create something that sounds very human but also very alien, and I think it works very well. The best example I would give would be the Sardaukar throat singing.
Yes,
As much as a meme as that's become, but
No,
but
I
it
think
was
you're
a very good piece of music, and it created such a nice atmosphere for that scene.
Absolutely. It sets it well. I think I've got a couple of things that do irk me a little bit. Well, one main thing that irks me a little bit about Dune. I think the script is slightly confusing. And the reason I think that
Do not read the book.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously its source material is busy, but also because of the Villeneuve style in terms of holding shots, and this is something that plays as a theme across his, he doesn't always leave, despite the length of his film, he doesn't leave that much space for dialogue sometimes.
No, he doesn't.
Which means that sometimes it can be crammed in.
You can have a 3-hour movie, but the dialogue still feels crammed.
Exactly, yeah. There's nothing wrong with it being confusing and needing your focus and your attention. That's a good thing, because it makes you pay attention to the film. But, you'll be rewarded by it. But sometimes you just need a minute to breathe and recuperate. But what it doesn't do, which I'm very glad about, is it doesn't have to do the normal blockbuster thing, which Interstellar does, which is everyone sit the down. Here's what's happening, and Anne Hathaway is going to explain everything to you right now, and you're going to listen, and that's going to be it, and then you're going to be. It doesn't do that.
There is an exposition dump at the start.
There's a dump at the start, but it's not in the same way that it's like
in terms of like,
audience, you are stupid. Here is what's going on. It's like this is the world we're in. Happy? Let's go and keep up. It then sets it from there. It doesn't then go.
The one thing you really have to establish is Arrakis is the place with spice.
Yeah.
Everyone needs spice for everything. The Fremen don't like outsiders. Go. That's kind of all you have to go off. It doesn't explain like the Galactic Parliament, the fact that there's one mega corporation that controls everything, and like the royal houses are just shareholders. But like you don't need to know that for the story.
Yeah.
It's just what happens. It doesn't explain how the Emperor works or his army. It doesn't explain how the Bene Gesserit work until it needs to.
I don't quite understand how the Emperor works in a physical way. Anyway, the man just floats about the place. It's rather weird.
No, that's the Baron.
Oh, is he the Baron? See, I keep getting the Emperor and the Baron confused.
The Emperor at no point in part 1 is in the movie.
Is in the movie. Okay, that's why. That's fine.
He's going to be introduced in
part 2.
In part 2, it's Christopher Walken.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, so
you know,
get
this planet.
Goddamn Sardaukar. God, I want to hear Christopher Walken say Sardaukar.
It looks great. The casting's actually really good as well. That's something that stood out for me. I really thought they got the casting right. Lil Timmy Tim and Rebecca Ferguson as his mum is really good. I really like Skarsgård's Baron.
I think Rebecca Ferguson kind of carries this movie.
She absolutely does.
I'm not going to lie, especially considering the kind of backseat role she has in the book for the first part. I'm very glad that she got her opportunity to shine, because I think part 2 is going to be Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya's movie.
Yes, it looks like it, isn't it?
Which everyone's still a bit annoyed about how they use Zendaya in the marketing, but I understand.
I get it, but I was also like, she's not in the film, mate. She's really not. I would rather have more Rebecca Ferguson and Oscar Isaac in the marketing, because I think they're big enough names to pull people in as it is.
No, I'd agree.
But
Javier Bardem as Stilgar is an inspired cast. I was very happy when I saw that.
I love that.
Stellan Skarsgård manages to play the world's most intimidating and fattest villain, and it manages to not get in the way of things.
Yeah.
I mean, Denis Villeneuve loves to use Dave Bautista and actually have faith in him in a way that not a lot of other directors do. I mean, he plays Sapper Morton from the beginning of 2049, which I'm sure we'll get to. Yeah. Another thing this has in common with 2049, and really any sort of big sci-fi that Denis does, is physical props. And I love him for that. Because it genuinely, I think there's a backlash starting to form in the market generally against the overuse of CGI. I don't think it's sort of manifested yet. Yeah. But I love the fact that Denis Villeneuve consistently uses physical props and miniatures whenever he can, because it just makes the world feel real.
I'm absolutely with you. Looking at the time, we don't have ages, and we're 20 minutes in, and we've only spoken about Dune. So we're going to leave Prisoners there, and you'll see why. So what is your number 2?
My number 2 is Sicario.
Excellent, mine Sicario. So
tremendous.
I texted you saying that this was one of the ones that I hadn't seen in the run up to this, and I was annoyed with myself for that. But when I finished it, I didn't think that I'd loved it, and then I thought about it again, and actually I think it's brilliant. So again, it lets things breathe. It has some of the most incredibly tense scenes I've ever seen. Notably being the traffic jam border crossing.
Yeah, the Bridge of the Americas.
It's so good. I think it's incredible. A genius bit of cinema how Roger Deakins has made a traffic jam, which is everything is stationary, and yet everything is as tense as possible, and it feels like everything needs to move. And you know the fact that kind of stuff happens in the open world shows what kind of place they're getting themselves into. And I think he's got perfect control of the camera, every angle, people ducking down to reveal somewhere else. It's
Johan Johansson's score.
Johan Johansson's score
was excellent for it.
Gorgeous. I think the reason it's so high on my list is that it's a blend of two genres. Because there's a lot of elements in this film that could be labelled as horror when you really think about it. To me,
I'm intrigued.
The opening scene is a horror film. The invasion of that house is a horror film. The opening of the walls is something that is a horror trope, and yet it's played very, very smoothly back into this action film, which then carries themes of masculinity and ego and callousness and all that kind of stuff. And I think that is one of the reasons why I loved it so much when I was thinking about it again, because when I was watching it, I started to go, what film is this? Like, what kind of mood am I getting into? But then I realised it's actually just it's basically an action or sort of thriller that is blending in these moments of genuine sort of horror and anguish, and I think that is done perfect.
I think it's done incredibly. I mean, my the way my list is shaped up is it's going to be very similar to the Nolan episode.
Okay.
Where my number 2, I think, is his best work.
Oh, okay.
But my number 1 is the one that I prefer.
Interesting.
But in terms of, I watched Sicario yesterday.
Right.
So
yeah, this is fresh.
That was my 4th watch of it.
Oh wow.
Overall, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, my brothers and I love that film, but Sicario. I mean, I'm gonna do what I always do on these podcasts and talk about themes.
No, please do. This is what you're here for.
But there is a broad theme across Denis Villeneuve's movies, as there is the way Nolan did with his kids. And Denis Villeneuve's film is about people trying to cope with the size of the world and their place in it.
Right. Okay.
The world is a big and scary place, and we are small. And people at the start of all of Denis Villeneuve's films, Kay in Blade Runner, Paul in Dune, Emily Blunt's character. I watched it. Kate. I've watched it yesterday. Kate in Sicario, and what they do is they start the film in a small world that they've built for themselves, where they feel safe.
Yeah.
Where the world works according to the rules that they think it works according to. And then the inciting incident in any other film, where it would be a bog standard hero's journey, is one where they are confronted with an experience or an event that shatters their perception of how the world works. So in Blade Runner, the replicant who kills soulless replicants may have a soul after all, and that shatters his perception. For Kate, it's that, she thinks she's making the world a more just place, a more sane place. And then she walks into that house of horrors. Yeah. In Dune, obviously it's going to play out over 2 movies. So the thing that shatters Paul's perception is the attack on House Atreides by the Harkonnens. Across Denis Villeneuve's films, they react in one of 2 ways. His protagonists are generally characters who adapt to the chaos of the world and recognize that they cannot confront it directly the way that they thought they could before, and they are the ones who live contentedly despite that. Like Amy, the archetypal,
absolutely Amy Adams.
There's Amy Adams' character in Arrival. She's confronted with the horror and the scale of the universe.
Of Abbott and Costello.
And she manages to just live happily, and there is going to be misery in her life, and she knows it, but she does it anyway. She's the archetype of this. This is the Denis Villeneuve's favourite kind of character.
It's really well emphasised.
I'm told that it plays out in Polytechnique. I wouldn't know, but
Emily Blunt is the only woman, and that makes everything feel like that in a perfectly heightened way, because she's then dealing with this whole other world that she's not familiar with, in terms of the horrors of the masculine ego that is then being shown to her on this particular mission. It felt like you just wanted every single bloke, bar Daniel Kaluuya, who even then says some weird things at times, to just back off and give her a bit more respect. But I think the film uses that idea of being crowded out and being unsure of your role in this big world by using a maverick style to the workers who she's with, who aren't by the book. She is.
Which is in and of itself is a tremendous critique of right-wing power fantasies.
Yes.
So I watched this applied to Batman. It's that institutions and systemically changing institutions and systemically changing society is not the solution to society's problems. The institutions are ineffective, and that it is the job of strong and powerful men to make the world a just place. Yeah. And Denis Villeneuve critiques that perfectly in this film. I want to ask you about Sicario. Who's the villain?
Who's the villain? Well, there's an argument, I guess, to say that at some point it's Benicio del Toro, at some point it's Josh Brolin. I think it's Josh Brolin.
I think it's Josh Brolin as well.
Yeah.
Because Josh Brolin is the one character throughout the entirety of the film that at no stage acknowledges Kate, or Emily Blunt's character, as an equal or a human being in any way. He's the one character who constantly plays... He is the archetype of that right-wing power fantasy for the entire film. He is their biggest obstacle to achieving what Kate sees as justice.
Absolutely.
Because what he's seeking isn't justice at all. No. It's Medellin. It's order.
You spot on. I love that. I love that the name comes from a time of invading homelands, which is actually what plays out, in the reading, and it plays out in what we watch. I just think it functions really well, and the script isn't groundbreaking. It does the job, but the pacing of the dialogue, I love in this film. I think it works really well because it varies on tempo and it flows like it should, and I really appreciate that, because amongst all the grandeur of his films, you've got to get the basics right. You can't just create scale and hope that's going to be enough. You've then got to also do all the basics right as well. Yeah. And this, to me, works really well with that. It's not completely gung-ho, and I think that's why I didn't originally think I loved it, because I was like, I thought this was going to be all guns blazing, and then I thought about it, and actually...
Well, on first watch, it doesn't seem to really break any sort of mould.
Yeah.
And then it really takes... for me, it was my second watch. And for you, I'm assuming it was just when you sat down and very purposefully thought about it. But I think it's one of the best films of the 2010s, easily. There is a sequel. I don't think it's Villeneuve.
I don't care for it, if it's not, to be honest. It's just the way it is. I think Benicio del Toro is the performance of the film, and I love all of it. I think we should move on to number one, and I think we should talk about what I know your number one is, because I know that you'll have a lot to say on it, and I want to get it said. So, right. Michael, is number one Blade Runner 2049?
Number one is definitely Blade Runner 2049 for me.
Go.
Is your number one Prisoners?
My number one is Prisoners.
Oh, okay. Well, that was my
number three.
Okay, so we'll definitely
we've sort of lined up then in this.
We'll definitely get a chance to talk about it then.
Okay.
Just side note, what applies to Sicario also applies to Prisoners in terms of the power fantasy dynamic. Yeah. And it's a big part of that film, so we'll definitely get a chance to speak about that. But Blade Runner 2049 is by far and away my favourite Denis Villeneuve film. It looks gorgeous. You could hang any frame of that film up in a house and it would be a celebrated work of art. Roger Deakins got his well-deserved first Oscar on his 14th nomination.
Took a while, didn't it?
For Blade Runner 2049. So I mean, look at the opening scene. It kind of tells you everything you need to know. The opening scene sets up the character dynamics and the themes of that story perfectly, and it also happens to introduce many of the physical and God, what is even the term? The physical things in the shot, that how they shoot it,
what scene, all that kind of
stuff. I mean, everything they do, they set up in the first scene and they carry it forward for the rest of the film. So I think I want to talk about this film through the first scene.
Okay.
The film opens with a shot of Ryan Gosling's eye really close up and a big music swell, but they only did that because that's how the original opened.
Sure, yeah.
Oh god, yeah, I didn't even mention it. It's a 30-year sequel.
It's a 30-year sequel.
It's a 30-year sequel.
Yeah.
The original Blade Runner was set in 2019. So of course 30 years later they set it in 2049, 30 years after the original in world as well. So you get to see Harrison Ford be grumpy in a movie, which is something you can't get anywhere else. I mean. But no, so the film opens with Kay in his police car flying across what has become of California. There's been rampant ecological collapse. The ground is composed of hydroponics protein farms and solar arrays. Everything in this shot is man-made.
Yep.
The car is man-made. The person driving the car is man-made. He's a replicant. Yeah. He is a human without a soul. So in this sort of this ecology without nature, this completely unnatural ecosystem that Kay lives in, he believes himself and understands himself to be fully artificial. He lands at the farmstead. Sapper Martin comes out. He's wearing a red glove and a red helmet. Red is used throughout the story, I think, to symbolise obstacles to Kay's journey. So the main villain of the film, Love, consistently wears red. Other moments in the film, characters wearing red oppose Kay. For example, the one in the scrapyard. The door to Sapper Martin's house, along with the flower above Rachel's grave, are in yellow. Yellow is used to symbolise Kay progressing on his journey.
Hence, when he goes to Jared Leto's house, and
the records at the Wallace Corporation, everything is bathed in yellow sunlight. That is also perfect for setting up Jared Leto's villain. Yes. In just set design, they set up a perfect villain.
I really hate it.
Because earlier in the film, Kay tries to see where a wooden horse is from. And a man tells him that he could buy him off-world tickets for this. It's an incredibly real wood. It's an incredibly valuable thing. Yeah. You go to Jared Leto, the sort of overarching villain. The most personal villain is his lackey, Love. And everything in there it's a palatial space, but everything is wooden and everything is bare. Because Jared Leto's blind in this film.
And in taste.
God damn you. But a big theme in the original Blade Runner and in this one is that eyes are the window to the soul. In the original, how you would tell whether someone is human or a replicant would be using the Voight-Kampff test through their eye movements. Jared Leto's blind. You can't see into him. He sees with artificial eyes. And so, yes, his apartment is comprised of the most expensive material on Earth and is bathed in artificial sunlight, which is something no one gets to see. But he doesn't get to see either, and he doesn't care. Everything it's wooden, but it's also featureless, and I think it's perfect environmental design for his villain. Anyway, back to the first scene, the conversation that Kay and Sapper Morton, Dave Bautista's character, again, Denis Villeneuve finally giving the man something to work with.
Yeah. In some really
because
small glasses, but yeah.
Oh god, yeah. But Kay says to Sapper Morton, "Are you Sapper Morton's civic number, whatever the number is?" And he goes, "I'm a farmer." He self-defines himself not as the replicant, but as whatever he chooses to be. He also says later on, "You newer models are perfectly fine killing your own kind." And Kay says, "I don't retire my own kind because we don't run."
Right.
He differentiates himself from the rebellious thing. He's perfectly fine not having a soul, and he's perfectly fine killing things without a soul. He defines himself by his obedience and his artificiality, which is why the inciting moment when Kay learns that he may be a naturally born replicant is the inciting moment, because it shatters his perceptions of how the world works. He was fine killing others, and he was fine doing what he did because he genuinely believed he didn't have a soul.
Right.
And then the second twist of the film, spoiler alert, is that he's not.
He is in fact
Simply another replicant. And that's where the film drives home its point, is that because when he believed he had a soul, he did. That's the point of the movie. In this artificial ecosystem of a world that is bleak and dystopian, just like Alison Hammond's interviewing style. I don't know if you saw that interview. But it's bleak and it's dystopian and it's this hellish environment. And everything is artificial. But the point of the film is that those who are content with the artificiality, for example, Kay and his AI girlfriend, are happier than those who reject the artificiality and yet still swim in it.
I'm going to come in at this point. The artificial girlfriend, Joy, is my favourite thing about the whole film. I think it's the cleverest part of all of it, and I think the revelation when he sees the massive hologram of her, the advertisement, and just goes, oh wait, she wasn't real. The only reason she was ever real was because I put feeling and effort into her.
Meaning to
exactly. I absolutely love that. I think it's so clever, and I think the scene where she gets the real woman in and they merge together is really cleverly done. I love that he gets cock blocked by his boss when they're about to neg on. I think that might be the bit of it that I love the most.
The thing that makes the scene with the advertisement of Joy, Anna de Armas, who amazing performance by her. The thing that makes that scene so heartbreaking is that when he tells her much earlier in the film, it's a very long film. It's about 2 hours and 40 minutes.
2 hours 43.
Yeah. Oh well. but the thing that makes it so heartbreaking is that he's talking with her about how he may be a naturally born human.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh well, we can't keep calling you Kay," or something along those lines. So she comes up with the name Joe. And he thinks, "Oh, I've been given a name. I have a soul.
Master has given Dobby a sock."
It is a master has given Dobby a sock moment, because someone has attached meaning to him, which is something he didn't think he ever deserved as an artificial human. And then at the advertisement scene, he finds out that was a default, because the advertisement says he looks like a good Joe. Yeah.
I love it.
It's heartbreaking.
Well, I was watching a video, a guy was like, "Seriously, Joe? That's the best you could come up with? Great name, Joe. No one in history with significance has been called..." Oh wait, I forgot about the president. Anyway.
Yes, well, I mean, not right now, really. Any significance either, but
the thing about Blade Runner is it's thematically perfect, and I'm not gonna dispute that at all. Thematically and in terms of as a sequel, it's perfect. It does everything it needs to do. It's made by someone who loves sci-fi, who knows the story,
who knows what sci-fi can do.
Exactly, and he's doing it to the fullest. I'm not gonna.
What I will say about Blade Runner, that I will agree with you on.
Go on.
It's too long.
It's too long. That's my main irk with it.
It's far too long.
I couldn't put it in my list because I like it. I don't love it, and I wanted to love it because I know how good it is. But too much of it irks me, and the main thing is it's too slow. This is the one. We're mentioning about dialogue.
This is the one where he leans too far into it.
Exactly. For example, when Jared Leto...
I think if it wasn't this one, it would have been Dune.
It would have been Dune. Yeah. When Jared Leto gets plugged in so he can see, that takes about a minute. And it doesn't need to. That's the kind of thing I hate. I hate how long the pauses are between lines. And I sort of get it in this world of constructed humans... It might be processing time. I sort of get that. Yeah. But then it makes watching it slightly tricky, and I think it detracts from the pacing a little bit too much. There is some stupid in it. Parts of the script are overly cryptic and pretentious, and the final scene, there are horrendous waves which cause death until she drowns, and then everything's calm for a few seconds just so she can look in his eyes and go, well, that was for cinema. Also, Jared Leto...
the eyes, Dom. They just needed, they needed one more eye
One
shot.
more eye reference.
Yeah.
Jared Leto's a moron.
Jared Leto, he's good in this, but I hate him, so...
But this is the thing, he's alright in it, but that's because he's doing his...
No, that's because he's being himself. He is megalomaniacal and self-obsessed.
Uncharacteristic and really selfish, and now I'm going to play that way. I'm going to stab this slimy woman, which is a good scene.
It's a good scene. If it didn't take like 4 hours.
If it didn't take 4 hours.
But
I know you probably want to talk about it more, but we don't have ages, and I want to.
No,
also...
I've said what I need to say.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Basically, great film.
Thematically perfect.
A
lot of problems.
But it's great. It's so good. So, my number one, your number three is Prisoners. I had to think about it for a long time, but I think this is the great Villeneuve work. And the reason I think about it is because frustration, revenge, worry, sickness, all played out on a minuscule scale compared to his other films. And I'm quite content with claiming that the cinematography in this is just as impressive as any of the rest of it. And the golden element of this is the work with Deakins, because what they do is they have several shots throughout all of it in which the film takes a breath and you aren't sure what you're focusing on in the shot. It's a wide shot and you can't tell if a car's about to come around the corner or if there's an element you're missing that's in frame. It gives the exact impression
it gives you the feeling that the characters have.
Perfect. It's Jake Gyllenhaal's investigation. He doesn't know what he's looking for. He goes in, he's in the right area, but he really doesn't know what to focus in on. And I think that's so clever. It still does the holding shots that he's famous for, but instead they're on a different scale. And I think rather than immersing you in a particular world to make you feel things, I think they tell a different message. And using the same technique to do different things is just genius. I think that's so clever. It's dark, it's cold, it's unforgiving, it keeps you guessing for a very long time. Every performance is magically emotive, great cast, real sense of mystery. In the style of Jeremy Clarkson, this is what I've written here, a note about his films. Is it a film? Is it Denis Villeneuve? It's raining. And I thought, yeah, actually, it is raining all the time in this film. I know pathetic fantasy is a thing, but this man has just taken a 20-foot baseball bat and hit you over the head with it. But it's the cleverest use of it, and the main
He needs
time...
a bloody hosepipe, man, I'll tell you that.
The main time I think this is really clever is because it's used when Jake Gyllenhaal is in his car and he is trying to follow Hugh Jackman to the shop. And it is raining so heavily that the windscreen wipers don't do anything and he cannot see him. His vision is completely impaired and he doesn't know what Hugh Jackman's doing in that moment. And as he does that, it's like he's losing sight of what could be important. It's tantalising us just as we think we're getting closer. It then blocks our view again. I think it's really clever. One could argue it falls apart slightly in the final scene. I think there's an argument to say that because it's like this is one of my problems with Denis. It's like nothing happens, or stuff's happening but nothing's advancing, and then boom, 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 everything happens all at once. You're like, oh, but I think there's a rhythm which lets it get there and justifies its.
I think Prisoners, more than other Denis Villeneuve films, manages to keep you engaged for a higher proportion of the film. There's still that moment, but I think more than other films, because the central incident in this film is a mystery. I think it's easier to do that, but he still does it. Yeah,
it portrays family rage perfectly, takes it to the extreme. There's two sides of it. There's Franklin's side, who is a nervous, introverted character who doesn't like what he's doing. There's Hugh Jackman, who goes completely off the rails because he's not held down by the presence of his wife, because she is gone. She's drugged up and gone. Whereas Franklin's wife is very much, where have you been? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I love that contrast. I know that Jake Gyllenhaal's character is kind of meant to be annoying. He never smiles. The only time he smiles is when he's dealing with or about to act on criminals.
Yeah.
And he knows they are. And that's when he's like, oh yeah, I've got you. And that's the kind of character
For example, when he says, you bought children's clothes.
Yeah, you bought children's clothes. And he's like, I mustn't be seeing very well. And he's like, oh, yeah. And then batters down the door.
Batters the, yeah.
I think personally, in terms of carrying me through a film and keeping me invested and being clever with what it's doing, I think this is the best one for me.
Well, it was my number 3. And the only reason Blade Runner is in my list at all is just because I like it.
But you're a massive sci-fi fan.
Yeah, this is true.
And that is a film made for people who love sci-fi.
This is true.
I would have liked to have talked for longer, but we've still managed a 45-minute episode, and I think we've covered a lot of the things that we wanted to.
I think we definitely have. I mean, the main thing I wanted to say about Prisoners is what we covered in Sicario.
Yeah.
It's about the power fantasy. Kelador is a prepper. He prides himself on being self-sufficient and being able to keep him and the ones he loves safe. And then when he cannot do that, when he is unable to do that, he turns into a monster.
Yeah. And exactly. And no one is more of a monster than Hugh Jackman. Because
he beats and tortures a fully innocent man.
Fully innocent Paul Dano. And then not only that, he then realises that he's not guilty and goes around to his nan's house to apologise for scaring her. I just love that bit. There's nothing to him. We never see anything to him.
Yeah.
It's never sorry to him because in his head he's still going, I still don't trust him. Yeah. But he still feels some level of guilt, so apologises to his nan instead. Anyway, that's been a great discussion, and I like his films.
I said this before we even started the podcast. It's between Denis Villeneuve and Chris Nolan, my favourite director, because they are the two that always deliver, and they are doing for blockbusters. Yeah, they're doing what needs to be done for blockbusters right now. They're
setting the bar.
They are giving other directors something to shoot for, and they are raising the standard of filmmaking, of big budget filmmaking. I'll say to such a degree that I just think that more people need to see both of their films more, and it's just they are a breath of fresh air right now. And I love them for that.
Yeah. Okay, recommendation of the week is Prisoners, because we both had it on our list, so you're going to go and watch it.
And it's great.
And it's a really good film. I'm off now to an actual Fringe show rather than this
what do you mean?
lie.
What do you mean? You put it down as a Fringe show.
Well,
for
actually,
tax
do
evasion.
you know what? Yeah, this is the Harrison. Congratulations! This is the first episode where we've had a studio audience. So thank you very much. Well done for sitting still.
Well done, mate. Is it time for take 2 now?
Hopefully next year we'll book a space and there'll be an audience and we can drag everyone along. That'll be fun.
As much fun as I've had.
Harrison literally got up and left halfway through this recording.
What do you mean? It's our many adoring fans. That was great though.
Yes, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm more than happy to have Michael on at any stage, and hopefully next week I'll have something. But I need to make some money because I'm poor now because of this Fringe.
Ta-ra!
Bye!